Great. So welcome again, everybody, tonight to our Lawyers Networking Happy Hour. And this is a community of attorneys and those people who support attorneys. So we usually have about half and half at every meeting, and we are now on Zoom. We used to meet in DC at the Darcy Hotel, which was lovely, and I'm sure we'll go back there in the future, but at least not till the end of the year. So continue to grow as a nationwide and even global networking community. And without further ado, I will let Eddie, our headliner, introduce himself and take away his presentation.
Great, thank you so much. And hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Eddie Ajaeb. I am a private investigator based in Washington, D.C. I'm the founder and president of Nighthawk Strategies, which I founded in 2016. So today's discussion is just going to be a really casual overview of what private investigators do, and specifically what they do for attorneys and law firms and how they help out on legal cases. As the first thing that comes to mind when people say private investigators is often the movie and television representations of these shadowy guys who are doing surveillance, and that is a big part of investigations, especially with domestic cases and insurance fraud cases and things like that. But for attorneys specifically, investigators are an extension of the law firm, extension of the firm to really hone in on investigating people and entities or businesses and organizations. And the reason why that is so that we can collect that intelligence, pass it on to attorneys who then are using it in whatever matter they're working on, such as if it's a civil lawsuit, if a child custody case, if it's finding an heir, probate case, anything like that is what the private investigators who specialize in more research-based investigations do. So I have a slide deck that I will show just to kind of walk us through different types of work that PIs do and how they help law firms. So I'm going to now share this. Now, is it really stretched out on the screen, or is it good resolution for everyone?
It's good.
Okay. Good. I have an ultra-wide monitor, and it really plays games with whenever you screen share, it comes out really small. So if anyone has a problem seeing it, let me know, and I can just make a quick monitor adjustment and get it to look better. So this title slide, this is what a lot of people think PIs do. I actually don't own any of this wardrobe. I don't have this fedora hat and a trench coat, and well, I do have a trench coat, but I don't use it for PI work, just when it's raining outside. But this is what I like. It's kind of fascinating to be a private investigator, because whenever I and meeting new people, or I'm talking to folks I haven't been introduced yet, and they say, they ask, what do I do? I say, I'm a private investigator. I always get this shocked reaction, like, really? I don't know if it's because I don't look like a PI, or I am, you know, I'm not always, you know, kind of hiding in a corner. But it's a fascinating industry. It's a fascinating occupation. And when I started doing it, I grew up in the era of social media and researching everything online. So a lot of what I do is research based. So just to give you a little introduction to me, again, I'm the founder of Nighthawk Strategies. I'm a licensed PI and licensed out of Washington, D.C. I do have a little bit of a legal background. My first job out of undergrad was a paralegal for the Department of Justice here in DC, and I worked for the antitrust division. So we were working on cases like price fixing, monopolies. One of the cases I worked on was the AT&T T-Mobile merger about 10 years ago. AT&T litigation, Apple, we worked on Apple litigation for ebooks price fixing. So I was a paralegal for DOJ at that time and did a ton of doc review and that sort of thing, and piecing together the government's theory of the cases that the government brought in those antitrust suits. I've also written for a few investigator and security magazines, PI Magazine and Pursuit Magazine. And I've done national trainings and events with mostly state-based PI groups, and also some national conferences as well for the security industry. So our agenda for today, and just to give a quick overview of what I'll be talking about, is first give an overview of what private investigations is, specifically the value and law firms and people in the legal profession. And then I'll go through some of the specific areas of expertise and how PIs help attorneys in those specific aspects. Then do a little fun fact or fiction of some PI work and some possible misconceptions about PIs, and then finally have lots of time for Q&A and networking at the end. So I look forward to your questions. So first is an overview of private investigations, specifically for law firms. Private investigators enable attorneys and law firms to be more effective by collecting actionable information and intelligence on people and organizations. A professional investigator provides clients with a competitive advantage when designing a legal strategy for a case. So the idea is to find factual information, no matter what it may be, on any entity or person, to help clients make more informed decisions. So obviously the discovery process is one of the longest process, is a very long process in litigation. And you have to make sure that you dot all your I's and cross all your T's. And same thing with private investigators in this capacity. Our job is to go out, collect the information, find the information, and then provide it in a report to attorneys so they can formulate a more effective and more strategic case, whether it's a civil litigation or any other matter that they're dealing with. So now going through the individual aspects of PI work and the individual areas of specialty. Probably the most obvious one is background checks. PIs such as myself do background checks, and these aren't just the typical run-of-the-mill background checks like you would get for like a screening for employment. These are very in-depth background checks, very similar to like getting a security clearance. If you're in DC, you're probably very familiar with that. This type of a background check that you would hire a professional investigator to do would be looking into someone's address history, their full criminal history, what motor vehicles they own, their financial information like bankruptcies, liens, judgments, civil litigation. We would look into what properties they owned. We would look into licenses, firearm permits, their occupation, their work history. We would even dig into, if this of course was relevant to the case, PIs such as myself, especially in the last 10 years, social media, cell phone data, digital forensics has been a huge part of doing a background check. Before we would look at public records and kind of go with whatever we could find there, and then 15 years ago this stuff didn't exist. So this is becoming a huge window into people's lives, and very useful for law firms to use social media as part of their investigative package, and more. And really, a background check can be anything that you want it to be. Of course, there's certain legal constraints of which PI's information they can and cannot obtain, and what's has to be subpoenaed and whatnot. But these differ from a employment background check, because an employment background check, as you may know, is just looking at criminal history. So write down everywhere you lived the last 7 years, the last 10 years, whatever. And the reason why they ask that is because they want to just search those states for any convictions in your name. So a professional, full legal background investigation is going to go way, way, way deeper than that, and is really going to pull up a lot of additional intel besides just the top level stuff. The second function of PIs is locating people. The great thing about this is that really can be applied to any kind of need. I've done cases, everything from parental child abduction cases to locating heirs. One of my very first cases when I got my license was to find an heir to an inheritance. And the family believed that he had been homeless for 10 years and hadn't had any contact with the family in over 10 years. And he was likely homeless and living in Denver. So it was a huge, casting a really huge net, and you know, and really using all available resources to find people. But we also do it for other purposes too. We get asked a lot by law firms to conduct skip tracing, which is basically when somebody you need for your case goes missing. It could be a witness, it could be the defendant, it could be your own client. There's been cases where the attorney or the law firm has reached a settlement and they need to go back to the plaintiff and they've just for some reason disappeared. So skip tracing is just that. It's using databases and resources to try to find out where people are. Also locating people, especially since social media, the bloom of social media has been things like tracing phone numbers, tracing email addresses, finding someone's social media accounts, or tracing who a social media account belongs to. So that ropes in a little bit more of those digital aspects of investigations. The next is pre-litigation investigation. Investigation can really, PI's work really doesn't have a definitive beginning or end, but this is one of the, this is another big area where we work in, where before you file a lawsuit, you may want to gather some intelligence on what's going on with the opposing party, or looking into the potential defendants of the case, or the claimants if it's an insurance case. Finding witnesses. For a lot of personal injury cases, believe it or not, especially if it's something like a major incident, like a car accident or construction accident or a fire, people post about it on social media, completely third parties, like they were not involved. But we've been asked to do a social media scrape to see if anyone posted about a particular car accident at a particular time and location, and then contact that person and have them be a witness for the case, these would be tort law cases and stuff. So they would become a witness just because they posted on social media about it. And the next point is it worth filing a lawsuit? That's another reason why investigators do pre-litigation investigation to really see what's there, which dovetails pretty well into this next function, which is asset checks. Pre-litigation, you'll want to find out if it's worth your time and your investment, especially if you're operating on contingency as a lawyer or a law firm. If the defendant even has any assets that you'd be able to take in the event that you even won the lawsuit. So we've been asked quite frequently by law firms before they file to look into what real estate they have. Some people have no assets, and then therefore it'll be really difficult to enforce that judgment when you don't have any assets you could place a lien on, or that you can collect from. But also post-litigation, if and when you hopefully win your case or reach a settlement, investigators are asked to do asset checks to see what assets somebody may own, their house, their motor vehicle, their boats, any trusts that they have, or any trust that they moved property into, so that those assets can be appropriately confiscated or appropriately taken if there's a judgment against that individual. And also one aspect of asset checks is understanding someone's liabilities. Maybe someone has a large real estate property or has a lot of equity in their home, but they have also had bankruptcies. There's other liens on that home. So that's why doing an asset check is a good way to get a financial picture of your subject. The next one, and one of my favorite, I love lecturing on social media intelligence. I've done a lot of training for PIs on using social media. It is really one of the most mind-blowing tools that you can use, because it's virtually limitless. It's become so ubiquitous, and it's become something that, especially over the last few years, people are constantly on, that it's just a gold mine for lawyers and really private investigators to collect intel from social media. You would be unbelievably remiss if you left out social media out of your toolkit and out of your pre-lit research. These statistics I have to update like every year or every few months that I give a presentation, because it goes up. Over 70% of the US adults have at least one social media account, but the average American has over 8 social media accounts. So these are things like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Pinterest, so on and so forth. Even dating apps are a huge resource when it comes to investigations. And the average American spends about 2 hours a day on social media and has over 80 apps installed on their phone. So it's not even just social media in the traditional sense. Even now, social media has become multidimensional. We're talking about sometimes, those apps on your phone that you can trace your when you go on a jog or you take your bike out for a run, and then you can upload it to your profile and your friends can like it. So these things also contain a ton of knowledge and a ton of valuable intel, and they're not. I mean, they are social media, but they're considered sort of on the fringe. So those are good resources as well. And think of, especially during COVID, how much communication we've done on social media. And a lot of that is publicly available. Going to someone's Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, when these accounts are open and public, it's very easy for investigators to collect that data and to pass it over to attorneys who are working these cases, because people are on social media now even more than ever, especially with the last several months of being under quarantine. The last thing I'll say about social media is it's very useful for gathering any kind of intelligence on your subject. Oops, I'm sorry. You may be looking for patterns of life. If someone claimed that they were injured, and your suit is all about a personal injury case, but they're on Facebook or on Twitter or Instagram posting pictures of them jumping on trampolines, that may be intelligence that you need, and it may be intelligence you can only get from social media. Certainly the person would be very careful when they are out in public or somewhere where they believe they can be seen. So social media is sometimes the only window there into someone's life. So investigating online personas and understanding what people are doing through that lens, through that social media lens. Think about how many apps and websites or services that you've given your phone number to or your email address. All of those are linked to you, and many times that is publicly searchable. So if I wanted to find you on Facebook, I would type in your name, or sometimes even Twitter and Instagram and some other services. You can type in someone's 10-digit phone number to search for them. These are some tricks and techniques that PIs use to find profiles, and we can also reverse search those names and phone numbers and email addresses to find other previously unknown social media accounts. So really, I could spend hours just talking about social media intel as an investigative tool, but so many attorneys and law firms have cited it as one of the best resources they could get, especially during litigation and the investigation that goes into it. So now we'll do a little bit of fact or fiction. You can, I'll just read these out one by one to give you a couple of seconds to think about each question, and then I'll reveal the answer. So the first one is private investigators. We're guessing if this is a fact or fiction. Private investigators can hack into computers, cell phones, social media accounts, etc. Second one is private investigators must be licensed. The third one is private investigators must have a law enforcement background or have law enforcement experience. And then finally, private investigators have access to information not available to the general public. Oh, I'm sorry, I must have clicked too early. The first one there is fiction. So private investigators cannot hack into computers, cannot pull cell phone records and see anything behind a social media account or a Facebook account that's hidden by privacy settings. So think of the rule of thumb is if you need a subpoena or if the average Joe needs a subpoena, so do private investigators. We do have some techniques though that are ways to uncover information that's still public but just a little tricky to get. So you can't literally hack into a computer. You can't break, a cell phone, break into a cell phone or a social media account. But we have some techniques that will reveal social media posts that may have been deleted or may have been posted on a rogue account. So there are some techniques, but literally hacking by definition is not allowed. The second one, private investigators must be licensed. This is true. PIs, with the exception of I think only like 3 or 4 states, there's a small handful of states don't require licensing, but the overwhelming majority of states in the US require private investigators to be licensed and vetted by their state. For DC, it happens to be the Office of Professional Licensing jointly with the DC Police Department Security Officers Management Branch. So just like you have to have a license to be a security officer or armed guard in some states, PIs is the same and usually falls into that security category. So if you are, if you as a lawyer or law firm are thinking of hiring a PI, make sure you ask them about their licensing. Third, private investigators must have a law enforcement background or experience. This isn't necessarily true, although many private investigators do come from a law enforcement background because they've spent many years doing surveillance, doing research, interviewing witnesses, piecing together cases, and that is all a very helpful background. It's not necessarily a requirement. Some states do count X number of years in law enforcement. You don't have to take an exam or something like that to pass the PI exam to get a license, but it's not necessarily a requirement. Like I said, for me, I came from a legal background. I was a paralegal for several years before diving into private investigations. And lastly, private investigators have access to information not available to the general public. This is true. This is why you should be careful about, as attorneys or as legal support staff, we have a lot of folks who do some Googling and they haven't found anything, so they say, okay, well, case closed, there's nothing out there. And that gets into a little bit dangerous territory because PIs do have access to databases that the general public doesn't have or even law firms don't have. As a law firm, you may be familiar with databases like LexisNexis and Westlaw and those types. There are databases very similar to that specifically for PIs, and those help us get information about vehicle ownership and registration. There are even ways that we can, run license plates and have a picture of where a car was spotted at a certain time by one of those license plate readers. That's a whole interesting facet of investigations too. But the bottom line is, yes, this is true. We have access to databases that many people in the public and even law firms don't have. So we often caution over reliance on in-house staff to do a full investigation when you could be missing some of that critical information. So, some of the key takeaways here are that PIs are able to collect intelligence. That's our main goal, is to collect information and do research, whether it's on a person, business, or organization. We do that through research. We do that through surveillance, kind of like what you do see in the movies and on TV. So it does involve both a research and a tactical aspect. And we can testify to our credentials and our license, certifications, industry practices. We can go on the stand and say, here are the ways we collected this information legally and ethically. We stand by it through our licensing, our credentialing, and our certifications, and so forth. So we're able to be that reliable asset for attorneys and law firms. And while it's not like the movies, in fact, truth has often been stranger than fiction with what can be uncovered, especially when it comes to social media, and how that has influenced some cases has been really eye-opening. So here's my information on the screen, on your screen. I'll also post it in the chat. This is my company information, but if you'd ever like to message me personally, you can email the info@Nighthawk Strategies, or you're welcome to add me on LinkedIn and send me a personal message there. And with that, I'll turn it back to the screen here, and we can get into Q&A.
Eddie, what jurisdictions are you licensed in?
I'm licensed in DC, and even though my work is based nationally, so I can do an investigation on anybody in the country, but the jurisdiction where I have my license is Washington, DC.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording so that everybody can ask the questions that they'd like to without any fear of posterity.